the gospel is chosen for a specific reason. There is one motive going through it. It's the question of choice. And the election of Matthias is a good example of choice. But before I get into that, I'd like to draw your attention to one thing which you might not have noticed. It's this insistence on the link between love and joy. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love. So as in human relationships, we do the will of the beloved and thereby maintain harmony. If that's not happening, there's a jarring note. We know it too well, don't we, from experience? So too with Jesus, we can't have his intimacy if we're not doing his will. But then what happens? I have told you this so that my own joy may be in you and your joy be complete. You can often read a person by looking at his forehead, his expression, his eyes. A long period without joy leads to something, even facially. People who have a nature which is rather upbeat rather than downbeat have an advantage in this one. They get over the same things more quickly. But joy is to be looked at. Why? It's something which, as in reverse, which could be a vicious circle, it brings us down more if it's not there and others with us. So when it's there, it can be a huge blessing. Go through life causing unpleasantness. It's causing unpleasantness also to ourselves, even though we might not admit it. But causing joy to others has accidentally the unsought knock-off effect of actually creating peace inside. Now, I want to zoom now into the question of what happened in the case of this choice. You know the story, don't you? Maybe what you wouldn't know so well is the moment of encounter between the Lord and Judas. We have an inkling of something of it from reading what the Lord showed to Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, who saw scenes of the Gospel in vision. And she saw this first encounter. There was a difference. Whereas the Lord chose himself as the prime mover, all these others, quite unexpectedly, fishermen, and one particular unexpected case, Matthew, who was not a persona grata for the people around him. You know why? Working for the other side. Follow me. And he got up and followed him without a word. That was a big choice. But this one, it would seem that he was trying to get the best of what was apparently a winning streak. The Lord was gaining popularity, and he could see that there would be a future here, it would seem. So ambition was entering into it. And the Lord, in this case, did not positively go towards him to choose him, but he, it seemed, proposed himself. And the Lord could see what was ahead. He would also see what could be ahead. And it would seem that a shiver went down his spine, as it were, in human terms. He could see this could go this way or that way. But he knew which way actually it would go. He took him on because the graces were potentially there in the air. And that is, in miniature, what faces us all. There's a package of grace in the air. And you know what happened. What we don't know from the Gospels, but again, this interesting bit, what happened, it would seem is this, again, quoting what happened in these intuitions were given to Blessed Catherine Emmerich. There was a point in his life in which things fundamentally changed. It's when Our Blessed Lady, who could see that he wasn't corresponding with the graces, discreetly tried to admonish him and warn him. And at that point, he reacted in such a way as to humiliate the Blessed Virgin, and so on. And that was the beginning of something really fundamentally bad going on in his will and soul. And from that point onwards, he was going towards a dark area. And we have in the Gospel how, after the Lord had given him this piece of bread from the bowl, Satan entered into him at that point, and he went out where? Into the dark. Well, in St. John, that means more than just the night, that means a dark area. And we know what happened. And many people have asked, did he have contrition when he actually committed suicide? Because we have actually this thing that he realized what he'd done, and he brought the money back, and therefore people have tried to say, well, he must have had contrition. Well, apparently he didn't have contrition as we know it, he had despair, and they're two very different things. And we know that he didn't make it because in recent times he's come out in exorcism. His voice has been heard. You can actually hear certain voices coming out in exorcism on tape. Hitler's one voice you can hear, but Judas in there, Judas, and he is actually, because he was a priest and a bishop and an apostle, got so close to the top, that is the bottom, Lucifer, on the other side, pure envy and hatred, he's actually now, as a human demon, collaborating with Lucifer, because he's interested in getting priests and so on. So it's an interesting situation. This envy, this fundamental hatred because one has lost what one had, can be awful. Jealousy is a very profound monster. Remember Othello, one of Shakespeare's great tragedies, where Iago says, "Beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster that mocks the one it feeds on." And many human tragedies can be retraced to jealousy and envy. It's a huge motive force in humanity, unfortunately. I jump. There was therefore this gap. And before Pentecost, Peter, as already the head of the apostles, decided we'll fill in this gap. And because he wasn't yet fully empowered, and also to avoid, it would seem, any kind of jealousy, because he had the power to nominate, he said, we'll ask the Lord to nominate, and therefore the people made their will felt by casting lots. Well, it was a kind of lottery affair. It wasn't directly people make themselves known, but anyway, they were able to see who would be possible, and they had these two choices, Barsabbas and Matthias. So they cast lots and asked the Lord that he would show through the result what he wanted. And so it fell on Matthias, and he was numbered among the 12. And of course, he was a witness of the resurrection and of all the public life of our Lord. He was a witness, that was the important thing. And if he became a great apostle, he evangelized in Judea, in Cappadocia, which was a great centre later on. Basil the Great and so on were out there later on. And in Ethiopia. And he was martyred, it seemed, with a hatchet or a halberd, a kind of vicious way, like a tomahawk thing, and that's how it's presented in iconography, a nasty death altogether, therefore what in red. Now that is what can happen out of choices. I want to come into this situation where we're at now. The Lord has his hand upon this little family. It's a domestic church. You are full of graces, protection, prayer, grace, warmth, all the elements of a Christian family are here, access to the sacraments more than most in an intimate way. And now the Lord has given us this new building. So in this Holy Mass we're handing it back to Jesus. Lord, this is yours. If you want to use it, over to you. And as in the case of Matthias, so now indicate your divine will. You are Lord, even physically, but there is space here to be honoured, and this young family can also radiate, and you can radiate through them, heal, wash, nourish, and teach. It's yours, Lord. Whatever you want, we want also. I just conclude. Discerning is important. What did they do? They handed it over to Jesus and they asked for a sign. we must do the same at times. The Lord can discreetly but really use signs. Secondary causes, e.g., somebody coming out of the blue in answer to prayer and being a voice for Jesus. But there are also occasions in life when things are determined. Exams coming up now, they're important ones. And then some things can be very important. I think of a few over the past years where moments in time have been extremely important. And as here casting lots can happen, so I can think of a few occasions in the past where beams were used in my past. You know what happened in certain things like admitting a person to solemn vows, they have to vote, and they have white or black beams. And if a person is refused, he's black bowed, that is, the majority are black. So that had to happen for perpetual vows in Italy, which led then, a few weeks later, to ordination, therefore big ones, bowls handing over, therefore, all to the Holy Spirit. And then, not long afterwards, in Rome, the same thing again. Actually, I share with you a little joy, because little joys can mean a lot. I found myself in Rome, in the very place where all who had done the same things before, including the likes of St. John Paul II when he was a young priest, had the same public defence. When you defend a doctorate, you have to do it in the same major public chamber, and there's an urn there, and you're voted white or black, and the majority then gives you the result. But then that's what hit me. Wow, this is the church. We're all handling the light of grace, of truth, of life itself, one generation after the other, and we're all given a chance. As John Paul II had the maximum and used it to the greatest possibility of human life, so we too, we must use to the full what comes to us only once. And I finish with this. Judas could have gone either way, so can we. The graces are maximum sometimes, and we can mess them up and botch them. We mustn't do that, because for all eternity to regret it. And if you only knew what a grace was, it's all to do with yes. Let's finish with this. When I was a child, Cliff Richard was a great singer, and the Shadows would play with him. And there was one song they had, it was the flip side of the young ones. It was, "We Say."